Alex. I'm here with the Des Moines Register Editorial Board, and today we are meeting with Senator Bernie Sanders, a candidate for the Democratic nomination for president. And quickly, the editorial board would introduce themselves, starting with
Clark Kaufman. I'm an editorial writer here.
Brian Smith, I'm the engagement editor.
Emily Nash, executive editor.
David Shivers, president and publisher.
Okay, we're going to jump right in, and first of all, very briefly, if you just, why we should consider endorsing you for the nomination.
We are in a pivotal moment in American history. We have an economy that is rigged. The vast majority of the people in Iowa and Vermont and around this country are working longer hours for low wages. And almost all the new wealth and income being created is going to the top 1%. I don't think that gets changed. I don't think we rebuild the middle class and bring about some degree of income and wealth equality in America unless you have leadership that is prepared to stand up to the billionaire class. That's number one. And number two, similarly, not only do you have an economy that is rigged, you have a political system which is now corrupt. And that as a result of Citizens United, millionaires and billionaires through super PACs are able to buy elections. And I believe from the bottom of my heart that is not what democracy is supposed to be about. It's not what people fought and died to preserve. And I will change that. And there are a lot of other issues out there, climate change, etc. This is a pivotal moment, and we need bold leadership. The same old establishment politics, in my view, is not going to address these issues effectively. And that's why I'm running for president.
And we've heard you say that before, but why you? How is it that you're going to accomplish that change? Now, in part, I mean, you've been criticized for not having a reputation for building coalitions or reaching across the partisan divides. How would that change as president?
Well, first of all, that's not accurate. I mean, it's simply and factually not accurate. So check it out. And what you will find is that when I was in the House of Representatives, year after year, I passed more amendments on the floor of the House working with Republicans than anybody else. Not second, not third. I passed more. So if the argument is I can't work with Republicans, that's false. Second of all, last session of Congress, which is a quite dysfunctional session, perhaps the major piece of legislation that was passed was a major health care reform bill for veterans. I was the chairman of the Veterans Committee. I worked with people like John McCain and Jeff Miller over in the House, Republicans, to pass the most significant piece of veterans legislation passed in the modern history of America. So anyone who suggests that I cannot work with Republicans is just not telling the truth. Third point, though, is that given, and this is what makes, for better or for worse, you will agree with me or you won't agree with me, but what makes my candidacy unique and different is that I think ultimately the way you bring about change in this country is by rallying the American people to stand up and fight for their own interests and for their children and for their parents and demand that the Congress start working for them rather than billionaire campaign contributors. That's the way real change is going to come about. And that's why in every talk that I give, I talk about the need for a political revolution, people getting engaged, revitalizing American democracy, and making Congress work for them rather than powerful special interests.
You know, one of the things that you've talked about is single-payer health system.
Yes.
And it's been recognized, at least by Hillary Clinton, that has very little chance of getting through Congress, even a democratically controlled Congress. How would you address that?
Well, look, as I said earlier, in my view, what this campaign is about is not just electing a president, and I hope I am that president, but more significantly, it is about transforming the United States in a very difficult moment in our history, where almost all new wealth and all new income and all power, virtually all power, rests in the hands of a few. So if the question is, let's take your good question and say, okay, How does it happen that there is one major country on earth, one, it's called the United States of America, that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right? And at the same time, how does it happen that we end up spending substantially more per capita on health care as do the people of any other country? We are now spending almost 3 times per person on health care as the British. We're spending 50% more than the French. Both countries guarantee health care to all of their people, far more than the Canadians. We pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. And yet we got 29 million people who have no health insurance and even more underinsured. So if your question is, given the fact that we spend far, far more per capita on health care than do the people of any other country, pay more for prescription drugs, but somehow uniquely in America, we cannot have a Medicare for all single payer program which guarantees health care to all people. It's just beyond our capability to do what every other major country on earth has done. I disagree. All right, and you say, how do you do it? Well, you have the courage to rally the American people, and you look the private insurance companies in the face, and you look the pharmaceutical industry in the face, and you say, sorry, you got to stop ripping off the people of this country. Real change is going to come about. But getting back to Lynn's question, it's the same point. I'm the first to recognize that real change does not come about unless the American people are engaged in the political process in a way that we have not seen. And if you can't envisage that change, then you're not understanding what this campaign is about. If we have elections, as we did last year, in which 63% of the people don't vote, then nothing that I'm telling you will happen. That's a fact. I can see that.
If you're in the White House.
All right, but if I'm in the White House, you're not going to have 63% of the people not voting. If I'm in the White House, it will mean that in Iowa we had a huge voter turnout. In New Hampshire we have a huge voter turnout. Nationally we have a huge voter turnout. That the Democrats will regain the Senate, probably do a lot better in the House. And that millions of people are activated to stand up and fight. So what I'm asking all of you to do is don't look at status quo politics and then ask me how are we going to bring about change. Look at it as a dynamic in which people are now standing up and are involved in a way they haven't before. Don't tell me that if a million young people if a million young people are actively involved in demanding that public colleges and universities are tuition free, that they don't want to go through life with large student debt, and that we have legislation before Congress which makes public colleges and universities tuition-free, substantially lowers interest rates on student debt, and millions of young people are activated, you know what? Congress will do the right thing. They will not do the right thing if those young people don't vote and are not active.
How important is winning Iowa to your campaign?
It's very important to me. Iowa plays a unique role in the presidential process. And without making it look like I am buttering up the people of Iowa, I have been extremely impressed about how seriously the people of this state take that responsibility. I think they understand that the whole country, the whole world looks at them, and they are assessing what my views are, what Secretary Clinton's views are, Governor O'Malley's views are, and so forth and so on, Republican candidates' views. And let me just say this, to give you an idea about how seriously we take Iowa. When we began this campaign 8 months ago, I think it's probably fair to say that 70–80% of the people of Iowa did not know who Bernie Sanders was. Okay, I'm the junior senator from the state of Vermont. A lot has changed in those 8 months. And what we are trying to do in this campaign is run a very simple, straightforward, down-to-earth campaign. As of tonight, when we're going to have a New Year's Eve party, I guess right next door to here, we will have had our own meetings, not me going to other people's meetings, Democratic Party meetings. We will have had meetings in which over 34,000 Iowans have attended. By the time this campaign is over, I hope that that number will be close to 50,000. So in other words, how do I think we can win this very, very important state? I think we do it the old-fashioned way, grassroots politics. I go out, we invite people. I've been blown away just by the turnouts that we have had. The turnouts were large, they're getting larger. We have been in towns in the last few days where double the number of people showed up that we anticipated. We were just, where was it, Knoxville? We thought 250, it was this morning, 250 people would show up. We were pretty excited about that. 500 people showed up. Where were we last night in Atuma? What do we have? 800 people coming out? Far more than we anticipated. So we are bringing out lots of people, and that's the way I do politics. I speak, people ask me questions, and we go from there. I think that is a winning formula.
You know, another person who's drawing crowds, as you know, from the other side, is Donald Trump. And I read where you said that you think you could attract some of his supporters because of they also are upset with the status quo and economic inequality and other things. But isn't there just a huge amount of difference between those candidates? How are you going to reach out to them?
This is what's going on in this country politically. Millions of people are extremely angry, and I think often the media, especially the national media, misses that. If you are the average male worker, the male worker in the middle of the economy, okay, right in the middle of the economy, in real inflation accounted for dollars, you are making $700 less today than you made 41 years ago. And yet you're producing a lot more. If you're a woman, you're making $1,000 less than you did in 2007. The average person looks at their children, they're saying they're scared to death. I can't afford to send my kid to college. I can't afford childcare. I'm getting older. Half of the people in this country between 55 and 65 have zero in the bank for retirement. Zero. Then on top of that, you got San Bernardino, you got ISIS. People are worried about attacks. People are nervous, they're unsettled. And then a Trump comes along. And Trump comes along and said, you're nervous, you're fearful, here's what the solution is. We're going to throw 11 million undocumented people out of this country. We're not going to let Muslims come into this country. We may shut down some mosques. Vote for me. That's the solution to our problems. Well, that's what demagogues always do. They always scapegoat. Nothing new about Trump. This has gone on for a few hundred years in countries all over the world. Nothing new. Instead of addressing the real issues, you scapegoat. You often pick on minorities. But I think that you're going to see a whole lot of people who are legitimately angry, legitimately frustrated. They're working longer hours for lower wages, but they're going to catch on that hating Latinos or hating Muslims is not going to solve the problem. That in fact we have to have the courage to get to the root cause of our problems, which to my mind has a lot to do with the greed and recklessness of Wall Street and corporate America, of an economy today which is structured in such a way that almost all new wealth and income go to the top 1%, a political system which is corrupt, in which billionaires are able to elect the candidates of their choice. And I think a lot of the anger out there that Trump is tapping on, I think a lot of those people, when they start thinking these things through, are going to realize that hating Latinos and Muslims is not going to solve their problems. And I think that some of them will come to us.
And how are you reaching that? How are you doing that? How are you reaching out to them?
Well, we're reaching out to them because we are speaking all over the country, and some of them are coming to our meetings. I mean, we don't, question people when they walk in the door. But I suspect you have a number of people. In fact, I just, coming back from Knoxville, there was a gentleman there who was active in the Republican Party. And he mentioned to one of my staff that a lot of the people in the Republican Party that he knows, or at least some of them, are supporting us. And we've heard that all over the country.
We get letters from readers, of course, and some of these people say that they agree with you on the issues, but they're concerned that you're not as electable as Hillary.
Thank you for answering. That's a great question. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. So let's deal with that. Because I think what you said and what your readers are writing is what many people feel. And the good news for me is it's not true. So what I would ask of you or the viewers out there, just Google it, go to the website, and find out how Bernie Sanders fares against Donald Trump in matchups. What you'll find is in the last matchup that compared Secretary Clinton and myself to Trump, I beat Trump by 13 points. I think she beat him by 7 points. Okay, and I think that's not unusual. Okay, we do better against Trump in most cases, not all, in most cases than Hillary Clinton. So that's point number one. The facts are that in terms of a general matchup, I believe we will do better against Trump or another Republican candidate than Clinton will. Point number two, maybe more importantly, Republicans win when voter turnout is low. Republicans did phenomenally well a year ago in the midterm elections. 63% of the people didn't vote. Democrats do well in 2008 when voter turnout is high and there's a lot of grassroots excitement. If you look objectively at the level of excitement in Hillary Clinton's campaign and in my campaign, I think you will conclude that we have the excitement. What has blown me away, and what I would not have predicted to you if I were here 8 months ago, I don't know when I was here, it wasn't 8 months ago, but I would not have told you that we are winning the youth vote by a very significant degree. And I'm not just talking about 30-year-olds or younger. Some polls have us winning 45 years of age or younger. That when we do our meetings, as often as not, a lot of the people out there are young people, working class people who say, you know, I haven't been involved in politics before, I haven't voted before, but I'm going to get involved now. So to answer your question, for Democrats to win, we need a large voter turnout. I think I am the candidate who can deliver a large voter turnout.
Why are you appealing so much? What's your theory on why you're appealing so much to that younger?
Damned if I know. You know, I think there are two reasons, but I certainly would not have, you know, told you 8 months ago that, you know, I think we're going to do great with young people. Frankly, I shouldn't say this, but I always say what I shouldn't say, get in trouble. I am probably of any member of the Senate the strongest advocate for senior citizens. I've helped lead the fight against cuts in Social Security. I want to expand Social Security. We are taking on the pharmaceutical industry, and yet we are not doing as well among seniors as I would have thought. Every poll has Hillary Clinton beating us pretty badly among seniors. And yet, among the young people, we are winning very significantly. So why is that? I think the answer is maybe twofold, but probably a reason that I don't know. Number one, a lot of the young people understand there is something wrong when their generation may be the first generation in American history to have a lower standard of living than their parents, right? Always the expectation was you're going to do better than your parents, right? Well, right now you got, I don't know how many, but a whole lot of kids who are still living in their parents' home, kids who are really shackled, these outrageous levels of student debt, kids who graduate college and can't find jobs commensurate with their education, young people who can't find any jobs at all. So I think from an economic perspective, our message is resonating, but there's something else too. And that is, by definition, young people are more idealistic than us older people. And they envision a different world, a world that could be. And they want to know why we are not leading the world in transforming our energy system in terms of climate change. Why are we not more forcefully taking on the fossil fuel industry and moving to energy efficiency and sustainable energy? And they feel very strongly about the issues of racial justice. They are, every meeting I go to, some young youngsters this morning, some kid asked, stood up and asked this question. They are tired of seeing unarmed African Americans shot by police officers. They believe very much in gender equality. They believe very much in gay rights. And those are issues that I believe in as well. So I think in a number of levels, we are tapping some of the feelings that young people possess. And I'm very proud to have just so much support, not only in terms of in terms of grassroots volunteers coming into our campaign from young people. It's very gratifying.
So let me follow up that question with rewind 8 months ago. How do you feel your views and policies, your understanding of the situation in this country has changed as you've met with many Iowans and many other Americans?
I've been in Congress for 25 years, so the views that I have are views that I've held for a long time. But when you meet people in Iowa and other parts of the country and hear their life stories, it just makes me appreciate how much more in trouble people are than we usually see on television. So when you hear the stories, yesterday in Iowa, talking to a guy, he says, well, we just learned recently our plant is going to be shut down. Hundreds of people are going to be laid off. Guy is in his mid-40s. I guess he's making $50,000 a year. He ain't going to find a job. It's a union job. He's not going to find a job at that wages. He knows it. And he's scared. A couple of days ago, I talked to a woman face-to-face, maybe 32 years of age, has a kid 5 years old. She makes $10.45 an hour. She's paying off student debt, scared to death. Talk in Iowa to older people, trying to make it on $12,000, $13,000 a year Social Security. So I think what a campaign is about is the opportunity to see people's lives up front. You know, you see them, you talk to them, they're kind enough to share their life experiences. And that's what I learned. That's how my policies evolve.
Anything that surprised you of what you've heard from Iowans?
I
In
would,
terms of the questions? or
yeah,
concerns?
I would say, you know, generally it is thought that, and polling seems to suggest that issues like climate change, yeah, they're real and people are concerned about it, but not that important. I detect here in Iowa that that may not be the case, that I think people perceive that climate change and what it will do to our planet is in fact a very serious business. We hear a lot. Just we had a meeting last night. A woman broke down. Her family owns a farm. This Bakken pipeline, they want to get eminent domain, literally go through her family's farm. She started crying about it. And I think, you know, people are more concerned about climate change than I would have previously told you.
You mentioned racial justice, and I know you proposed new rules on the use of force by police agencies and that kind of thing, but how difficult would that be to implement at the federal level?
Sure.
Because even the states can't.
Right. Look, what you can do, you know, police departments are locally run by, you know, I was a mayor for 8 years. And we work with our police department. But this is what you can do. There are ways that you can use the authority of the president to do things like create model programs. Now, the use of force doctrine, here's what you got. And again, I've worked with police officers my whole life, and I have enormous respect for police officers, and it is a very difficult job. Anyone thinks it's an easy job, it's always easy to second guess. These guys are out there, and I appreciate what they do. But I think as a culture in this country, we have got to understand that lethal force should be the last response, not the first response. If you have somebody who is mentally ill and brandishing a knife, for example, is there a way to subdue that person without shooting them? I think there's a horrible experience that we had in my own state. And just think about this for a moment. A mother called the police to deal with a problem that our mentally ill son was having. Son was killed. What do you think that mother feels? I mean, so we need better training. You know, obviously there are times when police officers should use their weapons when they're in trouble or somebody else is getting killed. But I think we have got to figure out a way, and other countries do it a little bit better than we do, right? How do you calm a situation? How do you subdue somebody without necessarily shooting them? So what you can do as president is not run local police departments, but you can work to create model type programs. You provide grants to work in that direction. Community policing, which we helped establish when I was mayor, means that police officers are part of the community, not seen as oppressive forces. It blows me away. I'm sure you've seen the same videos that I have about Ferguson, where it really looks like it's an invading army coming into town. That's not how you get trust with people. You get trust when police departments and police officers are part of the community. So there's a lot to be done. The president does not control local police departments, but can establish some models and work with police departments.
As part of the solution, more active involvement by the U.S. Department of Justice in terms of reviews and that
Yes,
kind of thing?
yes. I think it's fair to say that if a person is shot killed while in police custody, that merits a federal investigation.
You mentioned, of course, jobs and economic uncertainty. If I'm right, the jobs program that you've proposed for infrastructure and this sort of thing would have a price tag of about $1 trillion. How do you envision that program working, first of all, but then paying for it?
Well, it will be paid for at a time of massive income and wealth inequality, at a time when many corporations are making huge profits. We have a situation where collectively corporate taxes today are substantially less than they used to be. And that on any given year, you have major corporations, General Electric, Verizon being two, who stash their money in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda. They don't pay a nickel in taxes. We're going to eliminate that. We're going to stop the ability of corporations to stash their money in the Cayman Islands. When you do that, you're bringing in about $100 billion a year, just doing that, into the federal tax coffers. And over a 10-year period, that would pay for $1 trillion. But I believe that when the United States used to have the strongest infrastructure, cutting-edge infrastructure in the world. We no longer have that. And I don't have to tell anybody here that all over this country are bridges. My state, we have many bridges that are in very serious disrepair. Roads, broadband in rural areas, water systems, wastewater plants, airports, rail. Tell me why in this great country our rail system should lag behind Europe, Japan, and even China. Why is that? It doesn't make any sense. And if you're concerned about climate change, by the way, and you want to get trucks and cars off the road, it might be a good idea to have a strong rail system. So yes, I do think we invest in rebuilding our infrastructure, making our country more productive, more efficient, and safer. And by the way, when you do that, $1 trillion over 5 years, that will create up to 13 million decent paying jobs. So I believe that's very important. You got a lot of people out there who are unemployed, underemployed. You got an infrastructure which is crumbling. Let's put people to work rebuilding our infrastructure.
You've also talked about payroll tax on the middle class, which you've indicated would probably be moderate, but it still makes some people nervous about what moderate might be at their income levels.
Right. Fair question. Secretary Clinton has said she will not raise taxes on people, I think, under 250, right? Meanwhile, in the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House, there is very good legislation that addresses a major scandal in our country. And that scandal is that we are the only major country on earth, not only major, we are one of the very few countries in the entire world that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave. One of the few. Every other country understands that when a mom has a baby, that mother should not be forced to separate herself from that baby because she doesn't have a whole lot of money. But what goes on in America, you have a baby, a week later, 2 weeks later, you're forced to go back to work to bring in income. That is unfair to the mother, unfair to that baby. Everybody understands that. And yet we don't have paid family and medical leave. So there's a bill in the Senate, introduced, by the way, by Senator Gillibrand, who succeeded Secretary Clinton, the senator from New York State, and introduced in the House by Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut. In the Senate, we have, I think, roughly 20 sponsors. In the House, well over 100. Almost all Democrats, or progressive Democrats, are on board this legislation. What does it do? It says that you will have, every family in America will have 3 months paid family and medical leave, not only for a birth, what happens if your dad has cancer and you need to stay home with him? Should you be able to do that? Yes, you should. 3 months paid family and medical leave at 2/3 with a cap, 2/3 of your income. You with me? No. How is it paid for? It's paid for by an increase in the payroll tax of $1.61 a week. Secretary Clinton does not support that legislation. I do support that legislation. I think $1.61 is a very good investment to make sure that every family in this country has paid family and medical leave.
Some progressives have also taken issue with the fact that they don't think you're as aggressive as you should be in terms of advocating for gun control. And I know this is an issue that came up just the other night, I think, at one of the meetings you were at. Is there specific legislation that you would support?
Well, one of the things that does bother me, but it's not new, I mean, this goes on in every campaign, is things get, it's occasionally in campaigns, things get a little bit distorted. I know you've probably heard that or seen that once or twice. Not everything is totally factual. So I guess some of my opponents have thought that it would be a good idea to talk about guns during this campaign. So let's talk about guns.
You don't think it's a legitimate issue?
Sure, it's a legitimate, absolutely. No, of course it's a legitimate issue. All of us are profoundly appalled, disgusted, that every 2 weeks, it seems, every 3 weeks, we read and see some lunatic walking in there and shooting people down in cold blood. It's a huge issue. But let me just talk about my record. All right, for a start, I come from a state that is a very, very rural state that has virtually no gun control, okay? Democratic governors oppose gun control. Republican governors oppose gun control. That's the way it is. The majority of the people in my state own guns. Hunting, very, very popular sport in my state. 1988, I ran for the United States Congress. We have one seat in the Congress. 3 people, I ran as an independent, Democrat, Republican. The gun people said, you can vote for the Democrat, vote for the Republican, don't vote for Bernie Sanders. This is back in 1988, because Bernie thinks that we should put a ban on certain types of assault weapons. I lost that election by 3 percentage points, okay? Am I going to tell you that it was the gun issue that defeated me? I don't know. But I was the only one who said that back in 1988 before it was very popular, okay? So I get a little bit tired about hearing that I don't have the courage to stand up to the gun people. I have a lifetime D- voting record from the NRA, okay? Okay. What I have voted for and what I believe is most importantly that we have to make certain that guns do not fall into the hands of people who should not have that. That means people with criminal backgrounds, people who are involved in domestic violence, people who are mentally unstable. I have voted and will continue to vote and will work very hard to strengthen and expand instant background checks. I have voted and believe that we have to do away with the gun show loophole. I believe that we have got to deal with this straw man situation where a person can legally buy a gun and then sell it to criminals. We got to make that a federal crime. I believe absolutely that we have to greatly expand our mental health capabilities so that when people are in mental health crisis, they're suicidal, they're homicidal, that they get the treatment that they need and they get it today, not 2 months from now. So, I guess it's easy, politically to say, oh, Bernie Sanders is weak on guns. I believe quite honestly, and I say this to you very sincerely, that in our nation today, clearly, we are divided on guns. There's no question about that. But I believe coming from a state that has virtually no gun control, that I am in a strong position to bring people together around a consensus, which does not do everything that everybody wants, but can at least take us a step forward to maybe trying to end the horrors that we have seen recently in terms of these mass shootings.
In terms of the breakup of the banks, which you've been advocating for a long time, a lot of people thought that might happen in 2008, 2009, and most of the anger seemed to dissipate over that issue. Is it a viable option now?
Oh, I don't think the anger is dissipated. I think the media, it's funny, how media is. Kevin has heard me talk about this a little bit, right, Kevin? We were just having a sandwich before we came in here right down the street. And I was watching MSNBC, and when we walked into the room, by the time we left, there's a terrible fire going on in Dubai, That's all it was on for 45 minutes. I don't know how many hours it goes on. It is, media focuses on one thing at a time and thinks the American people are not smart enough to deal with multi-issues. I talk about Wall Street in every speech that I give. Trust me, the people have not forgotten and they have not forgiven. So I think people do understand that when you have 3 out of the 4 largest banks today, that they are bigger than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail. people think that's pretty absurd. When you have kids getting police records for possession of marijuana, but CEOs who operate illegally and help destroy the economy don't have a police record, people think that's pretty absurd. So I don't agree. I think people do understand the power of Wall Street, the negative impact that Wall Street has on our economy. I believe that the business model of Wall Street is fraud. You know, every now and then a bank gets caught. You see it on the front pages, and they pay, billions of dollars in fines. That takes place with very weak enforcement. Now, what happens if you really were enforcing the law? If you had a strong SEC? So I do believe absolutely that for the sake of our economy and our political system, they have to be broken up. And I think the people of America would like to see that.
And in terms of the political will, maybe that's the better way to phrase it. Is the political will there to do that?
Not among Congress right now.
Yeah.
Of course not. I mean, I was on the banking committee in the 1990s when I was in the House. So I was there in the middle of all of these debates. And if you want to have more information on this, on my views, go to YouTube, look up Bernie Sanders, Alan Greenspan. Greenspan testified before our committee. Hear what I said to him. Hear the dialogue that he and I had. Turns out that I was absolutely right. Greenspan was absolutely wrong. He was advocating for the deregulation of the banks. What Wall Street did in a 10-year period is spend $5 billion in campaign contributions and lobbying to get deregulated. How's that? $5 billion in a 10-year period. And that's where we are as a country. And that's why we need a political revolution. So do I think I can walk into Mitch McConnell and say, hey, Mitch, let's work together and break up Wall Street? Probably not. But do I think the American people are ready to do that? Yeah, I think so.
Go back to education for a minute. You've talked a lot about making college affordable and changes there. Are there changes you would make to the elementary and secondary system to make sure students are ready for college and can be successful there?
Yeah, well, I mean, in the same way as is the case with police departments, the federal government doesn't control, the Des Moines school board, nor should it. But here's what I would say. The revolutionary impact of saying that public colleges and universities should be tuition free, the revolutionary impact of it, is that it says to every teacher, every parent, and every child in America, kids who are in the 4th grade, who are in the 6th grade, kids whose parents, like my parents, never went to college, kids from low income and working class backgrounds. What that message says is that if you study hard, you're a kid, and you study hard in school, and you do your schoolwork seriously, that you will in fact be able to get a college education regardless of the income of your family. That's revolutionary. Because there are a lot of kids, millions of kids today, who do not believe under any circumstance that they're ever going to go to college, and that impacts what they do in elementary school and high school. They drop out, they don't study. Why should they study? What doesn't matter? Who cares? They're not going anyplace. So I think that's pretty revolutionary. Second of all, I think what we have got to do, and again, this is, a general statement. I come from New England, and we all love Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, and I understand that the University of Iowa is playing in the Rose Bowl. I wish them the best, But what we have to understand is that in terms of our national priorities, maybe, just maybe, education is more important than football. I know that's probably lost me all kinds of votes out there. But nonetheless, that education throughout our entire lives, becoming the best educated workforce in the world, that should be one of our national goals. And that means appreciating and honoring and compensating adequately teachers. I really do want to see those kids, those young people in college right now, the best and the brightest, understand that teaching is a fantastic profession, and they deserve good compensation for that. They deserve to be respected in a way that is not the case now. And when you ask me about education, please understand that education does not start at the 1st grade. The vast majority of married couples in this country today, both mom and dad, are working. They have a right to know that their little ones are going to be in high quality, affordable child care and pre-K centers. And that is not the case right now. So rather than give tax breaks to billionaires or spend billions on unneeded weapon systems, I do believe we should fund education adequately and make sure that every kid in this country, regardless of his or her income, gets the education they need.
You mentioned the message that free tuition would send to the less affluent families.
Yes.
What is the message that it sends to those families who are wealthier and for whom there is no financial obstacle?
Well, the message is if they want to send their kids to a public university or a public college under my bill, they will be able to do so. But the message is also that as wealthy families, they are going to be probably paying more in taxes to help us fund not only that, but many other things. Now, one of the things that I believe in, and my wife believes it even more strongly than me, but she's right. She's always right. Hear that, dear? You're always right. Is that we live in a world that is very, very complicated. You know, nothing is easy. And it's getting more and more complicated. So what my proposal is a pretty simple proposal. It is based on the belief, and as many of you know, Iowa, it turns out, I didn't know this until recently, was one of the leaders in our country in the fight for public education. Do you all know that? Of course you know that. You're Iowa's largest newspaper. You're supposed to know that. All right. Where we are right now in 2015 is saying that today a college education is the equivalent of what a high school education was 50 or 60 years ago. So what all the states have said, look, all the kids are entitled to free public education up to high school, right? God didn't create that. Right now, we need more education. The world has changed, a more complicated world. So I want to see everybody get a higher education. But I want to see it simply. Right now, kids go to high school here in Des Moines. That's all. Their parents pay property taxes. They go to school. That's what I want to see it. I don't want to have people filling out a million different forms, send their kids to college, public colleges, universities, tuition free. End of discussion. And we will fund that particular proposal, by the way, through a tax on Wall Street speculation.
What do you say to people who, well, first of all, I went to private college. Others,
So did I.
Wouldn't this hurt? And there's a lot of small private schools in this
Right.
country. What do you say to them that your proposal, what would do to them?
No, I went to a private college. And the goal here is to make at least public colleges and universities tuition free. We're also going to provide substantial help in terms of improved Pell Grants, et cetera, to people in private colleges. Private colleges are a very, very important part of our higher educational system. It goes without saying. And lower and moderate income kids who want to go to private colleges have every right in the world to do so, and we will provide support to them.
On the issue of immigration, you've said you'd be willing to take executive action within your first 100 days on the job. What exactly, and this is toward providing a path to citizenship, what exactly would that look like? How would you do that?
Well, for a start, it would not mean more deportations of refugees who came to this country. Would not mean that. And the other thing it would mean is the goal, of course, is to have Congress pass comprehensive immigration reform. That's the goal, because once you have legislation that is solid and long-term, executive orders can be changed by the next president. But the goal is to unite families, not to divide families. It means to build on DACA, to build on DAPA, and to make sure that relatives of people who today can get legal status will also get legal status. I've been around the country and I've talked to a lot of Latino families and kids who worry to death that their parents or somebody else is going to be deported. So what we will do is expand on what the president has done. The president has done some good work. He's now in court fighting for other things. But we will expand on that to keep families together rather than divide them. The ultimate goal is to make sure that 11 million undocumented people in this country have a path towards citizenship.
But
How realistic is that, given the legal challenges and the questions that have been raised already about DACA and DAPA, to expand on those executive orders?
Well, you do what you can do. What I have promised is that I will do my best. I can't speak for the United States Supreme Court. But I will tell you that I will try to appoint people to the United States Supreme Court who will understand the problems of the middle class and working families. We do the best that we can do, and what I said is what I will fight for.
Are there any exceptions to the 11 million? I mean, what is the process there for those who are in the country illegally now?
Who are in the country, who are undocumented right now?
Right.
Well, the process is to try as soon as possible to provide legal status to people and to move them to a path toward citizenship. As you know, in 2013, the Senate passed comprehensive immigration reform. Not the best bill in the world, but it was something. So I want to revisit that. I want a stronger bill in the Senate, and I want the House to take it up as well.
Has anything changed, do you think, that would make that possible?
Well, I think, it's back to the same old issue of what you can accomplish with Congress. If the people themselves, I think we can make the case to the American people, and not just to the Latino community or the undocumented community, that taking people out of the shadows is the right thing to do, not only from a moral perspective, but from an economic perspective. Just very briefly, if you allow me, in 2007, I went to Immokalee, Florida. Do you know where Immokalee, Florida is?
Yeah, it's in the Southwest, where they grow all the tomatoes.
Exactly. That's why I was there. And you know who grows those tomatoes? Who picks those tomatoes? Undocumented workers. When I was down there, just coincidentally, on the day that I visited to meet with undocumented workers, the U.S. attorney, I believe it was arresting a contractor. Do you know what the charges against the contractor were? Slavery. Holding people in involuntary servitude, literally keeping them chained up at night to work in the fields, keeping them on heroin or something. The conditions there were appalling and people were abused. When you take people out of the shadows and you give them legal status and you allow them to stand up and fight for their rights, it fights back against the race to the bottom. That was the bottom of the economy. Horrible working conditions, horrible housing, God knows what people were paid. They were sitting around not getting paid anything, and so forth and so on. So when we raise the lowest among us, you improve the standard of living of everybody. And that's a strong argument for every American to understand. Bottom line is, for a number of reasons, we need a path toward citizenship.
I'll ask you about foreign affairs. Last time you were here, we asked you about that. You said that your campaign was catching up, and that you were going to come out with some policy papers on that. Then Paris happened, the terrorist attacks in Paris. A lot of people said, well, you're doomed because of that. What have you done to sort of prove your foreign policy mettle?
How many hours do we have? I don't want to take you into the new year, so we're going to... How do I answer that? What was the most important vote cast in the modern history of America on foreign affairs? Yeah, it was Iraq. What does Hillary Clinton have to do to convince you that she has significant foreign policy judgment? She cast the vote for the war. I cast the vote against the war. All right. So, I think many of these things, I'm not here. Hillary Clinton's a friend of mine, and I respect her and I like her, truly. But I do get a little bit upset that people say, oh, you don't have the belt. Well, yes, I was not Secretary of State for 4 years. Somebody I know was Secretary of State for 4 years. But not only did I vote against the war in Iraq, I helped lead the opposition to the war in Iraq. Don't believe me. These young people know how to Google anything, and in 5 seconds, they can get up on your website the speech that I gave on the floor of the House in 2002 in opposition to the war. Check it out. And what you will find is that, and I say this with no joy in my heart, I went to too many funerals in my state. Too many funerals of young people. So there's no joy in my heart to tell you that much of what I feared turned out to be true. Who has the foreign policy experience? Who has the judgment? Okay? I would not have supported. It's very easy, especially for Republicans, to tell you how tough they are. I know it gets votes. We're going to crush ISIS tomorrow, and we're going to send the troops in, and we're going to destroy them. But people forget to ask, what happens the day after? What happens when you have regime change and there's a political vacuum? Okay? And that happened in Libya, where ISIS now has consolidated a great deal of territory. Certainly happened after Iraq. So what I believe is that I'm not a great fan of regime change. I understand there are terrible dictators out there, Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, Assad. But we have got to be not just tough, we have got to be smart. And I've outlined a very specific proposal on how I believe we crush ISIS. And most importantly, what we learn is that we don't repeat the same mistakes as we made in Iraq by simply sending in American troops. That what we do is work in coalition. And what I also learned is from people like King Abdullah of Jordan, who is one of the few heroes in that area. And this is what Abdullah said. What Abdullah said is, yes, terrorism is an international issue, but it is primarily a Muslim issue. It is primarily a war for the soul of Islam against those people, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, who are hijacking their religion and converting it into a terrorist, intolerant religion. And he said, and he is absolutely right for a dozen different reasons, that the way to destroy ISIS is through Muslim troops on the ground with our support. That is what I believe. And let me be very clear. As President of the United States, I will do everything that I can to see that our young men and women in the military are not caught in a never-ending quagmire of perpetual warfare in the Middle East. That is a quagmire on top of a quagmire. So what I think you need is an international coalition with people who we disagree with, like Russia. Russia lost hundreds of people in a plane taken down by ISIS. With the UK, France, Germany, coalition in support of Muslim troops on the ground. Now here is, in the midst of a lot of bad news in the region, maybe there is a glimmer of hope. And that, as all of you know, the Iraqi army, which God only knows has not been a very effective fighting force, has recently retaken Ramadi. ISIS has lost about 40% of the territory they've held in Iraq in the last year. So I think the formula, and Obama gets criticized, he's too weak, right? Well, I've not gone to funerals in the state of Vermont recently, and I thank God for that. So I don't believe this stuff. You know, I know the Republicans are very tough in sending other kids, not their own kids, but other kids' families' kids out to war. So I think the formula has got to be not to get involved in perpetual warfare. Coalition, the United States cannot do it alone. Muslim troops on the ground.
So what, is there anything different then that you would be doing that Obama's not doing?
Yeah, I think I would be a little bit tougher on countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, phenomenally wealthy countries. Qatar turns out to be the wealthiest country per capita in the world. They're spending $200 billion in preparation for the World Cup they're hosting in 2022. How much do you think they're spending on the war against ISIS? Not a whole lot. Under my administration, they would spend money. They would help us. Saudi Arabia is now fighting in Yemen. They should be fighting against ISIS. I think I'm losing my voice again here, so we may have to, yes.
Is there anything else, because as you said, there's a lot of Americans that are angry and they're anxious about their future. I think, ISIS and the crisis in the Middle East and some of the other crises that are happening around the world play into that anxiety. Is there anything else you'd say to potential voters about how, as president, you would handle foreign affairs and bringing down the level of anxiety for?
Look, let us, maybe the first thing we have to do is to be honest with the American people. And anybody who tells you they have a simple solution to these very complicated and difficult problems. If you study what goes on in Syria, we have groups fighting groups who are fighting groups who are fighting groups. I mean, nobody could even keep track of what is going on. This is an incredibly complicated issue. So anybody who tells you they have a simple solution is lying to you. That's the beginning. So I'm not telling you that there is a simple solution. It is a very complicated and difficult situation. And that's the first thing that we have got to recognize. The second thing that we have got to recognize, I think very importantly, and this is the lesson of Iraq, the United States cannot and should not do it alone. Saudi Arabia has the third largest defense budget in the world. Third largest defense budget in the world. You know what? They have got to play an active role in destroying terrorism. And among other things, people in their own country should not be contributing to terrorists, but that's another story. So we need to be part of a world coalition. We need to lead the world coalition. But I don't believe the United States can or should be doing it alone. How's that? Am I dismissed?
Already?
So I've got a question for you. You've been on the campaign trail now for several months. What have you seen that's giving you confidence that this political revolution that you say must happen is going to not only elect you, but to provide a mandate for all the things that you're talking about?
No, ask the guy next to you. He's been to many of our meetings. And I think what he will tell you is the turnouts have been very, very, very large, that there are a lot of young people coming out to these meetings, that there is a lot of enthusiasm, and that the people who are coming to our meetings believe that we as a nation can do much, much better than we currently are doing. And I am very gratified by the kind of support that I'm seeing from non-traditional voters. You know, and I don't have to tell you, you know this better than I do, that say within the political structure here of Iowa or the political structure in New Hampshire, we have very little support from the political establishment. Matter of fact, I'll go further than that and say we have almost no support from the political establishment. You know, we got some members of the legislature in New Hampshire, not a whole lot. Hillary Clinton has virtually all the support.
I'm curious then, what are you going to look for when you pick a possible running mate? Are you looking for an insider, outsider?
Are you looking for a job?
I don't know.
It's a little bit early to be thinking about. But clearly, no, it will not be an insider. It's not an insider or an outsider. It is somebody who in his or her heart understands what is going on with working families in this country and has a track record of standing up and fighting. You know, whether you look back, and Barack Obama is a good friend of mine, and I have supported him on most of his policies. But if you look back over the past many, many years, whether it is Democratic administrations or Republican administrations, always seemed that Goldman Sachs, one of the Wall Street firms, seems to play a very important role in the administration. That will not be the case in a Bernie Sanders administration. Goldman Sachs will have to look elsewhere, but they ain't going to find a spot in my administration.
So what can we expect in the next 30 days here? What's your strategy going to be?
Well, I think our strategy, we have had meetings now with about 34,000 people. We're going to work very, very hard. These guys, they work me very hard in the back. We're going to be doing town meetings all over the state. I'm going to be here in Iowa a whole lot of time. My wife is going to be here in Iowa. We'll have surrogates here in Iowa. Keith Ellison was just here for us doing a great job the other day. Congressman Ellison in Minnesota. And we're going to do it door to door. And so I want to give you don't be too surprised if on election night there's a large turnout and we win. I think there's a real possibility that that can happen. But basically, to answer your question, I'm an old-fashioned politician. Yeah, we do TV ads, we got radio ads and all that stuff. But mostly we do it the old-fashioned way, is that we have people knocking on doors, and we do meetings, people come out, I speak, they ask me questions. I think that's good politics. I feel comfortable with that kind of politics. It's worked in Vermont. Iowa is in many ways very similar to Vermont. I think it's going to work here as well. Okay? All right. Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you.